Simon, many thanks for joining me today.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
So you're an acclaimed author of 3 best-selling books. You're an ex-global CEO. You've worked in 4 continents. You're an innovator, exec coach, radio DJ, entrepreneur. You sit in very many non-exec boards. Who better to give us a bit of positivity?
Thanks. And, I've done a lot of things and also I failed as well. I mean, failure is a key pillar of learning and then building and then enabling future positivity. So it's important to say that, but it's great to be here.
I think the only thing that negates your positivity is your qualification in 3 jurisdictions as a lawyer, a corporate lawyer. I'll leave that there.
Now I'm an ex-lawyer.
So one of the things you're an expert in is resilience and mindfulness. In fact, I know you've contributed to the mindset and mindfulness.com as a writer. That's probably as relevant today as it ever has been.
Yeah.
Can you give some tips in terms of how we can improve our resilience and mindfulness and why it's so important?
Yeah, and just a shout out. So my colleague Justin Caffrey invited me to be part of that, and just a wonderful guy, and he took me through a process of self-awakening around resilience. I've always been resilient. It turns out I've always been resilient, but I didn't know what it was. So I think it's important to understand what it is. So it's the capacity to cope with life. So how we manage our emotional, behavioral responses to what comes to us, right? And good things will happen to all of us, and negative things will happen to all of us. And really, there are 3 types of resilience. There's self-resilience. So, and the key one there is self-awareness. Self-awareness is critically important. And there's also situational awareness and how you deal with anxiety. Then there's life resilience, how you interact, how you network. And then societal resilience, how you interact, how you communicate, how you cope with life. But coming back to self-awareness, I think self-awareness is the key to resilience, okay? If you're not self-aware, if you don't understand that where you are in life, and if you don't accept that you need to live life the way it is rather than how you want it to be. I think a lot of people live life, I mean, you've been through, trauma, I've been through trauma, and I think a lot of people think that they can control life and live life the way they want it to be until something hits them by the side. And then it deconstructs their paradigms. And so I think the key to resilience is an awareness of what it is, self-awareness, and realizing that you can't really control life. And it's really important to be positive and have fun, but you need to accept what comes to you. Does that make sense? Is that self-awareness is the key?
How do we go about developing that self-awareness? Is it a 360 exercise at work, or is it sitting in a quiet beach and just reflecting?
It's the whole area of mindset, okay? So there's no shortcut, okay? So basketball champions and major soccer players who've been top of their game, they still practice 5 or 6 hours a day, right? People think, why do they practice 5 or 6 hours when they're the best in the world? They're the best in the world because they keep practicing. So it's practice, practice, practice. It's living in the moment. It's understanding who we are. It's being careful about who we associate with, and it's being very conscious about what we're thinking. So basically we are what we think. So if we're thinking negative thoughts, this as well. If you think negative thoughts, you'll be negative, right? So it's having that awareness about what you're thinking, who you're associating with. It's really, really important to connect with positive other people. We're talking about positivity with enthusiasm. I read somewhere it's important to connect with other people. I think it was Brian Penny who said, connect with other people with enthusiasm. So just because they're positive, you can also return that. So I think it's also about consistency. It's about simplifying life. It's about self-observation, and it's about mindfulness. So there's no magic answer, but it's all of those things. You have to keep practicing.
And with additional practice, you're building confidence effectively.
Absolutely. You're adding to your confidence. And that's a really important point that I came up with something when I was doing a training this week, and somebody came back on LinkedIn and said, I love your quote. And it was something like, it's important to connect your confidence with your capability, because so many people are capable, but they're lacking confidence. They have imposter syndrome. And so part of that self-awareness and resilience is allowing your confidence to catch up with your capability. And that's really, really important.
Great advice. Thanks. So I know one of your specialities is that you're a growth specialist and an exec coach on top of that. So, where do we start as individuals to try and grow ourselves?
That's a really big question. Okay. The way I break it down is, for me, growth, there's outer growth. So there's, career, ambition. And that's what most people focus on, as you know, their career, money, ambition, how many cars, et cetera, et cetera. But outer growth is finite, right? We like to think it's infinite, but you can only ever drive one car. You can only ever sleep in one bed, right? So there's outer growth, but there's also the inner growth, right? And as you know, inner growth is infinite. That is the irony. Most people think the outer growth is infinite. The inner growth is infinite. There is no end to how you can develop internally. So with that in mind, I work with clients around 4 parameters: business growth, leadership growth, brand growth, and mindset growth. And the mindset focuses on the inner. And I think, to answer your question directly, it's about working hard on yourself. And I think it's been proven that if you can learn growth techniques 70% through doing. So you have to do stuff. So you have to network. You have to do things like this. You and I have come into podcasting this year. There's no substitute for doing it. So 70% of building that growth mindset is doing. 20% is through others. So being coached, mentored, and only 10% is reading or doing courses. So I think, to answer your question, to grow, you need to think about those 4 parameters. You need to be mindful that it's not just external, it's also internal growth. And then you need to focus on basically doing. You have to work on yourself.
It's really about challenging yourself to do new tasks, essentially.
It is, and it's interesting. I interviewed a guy called Eduardo Briceño, who is the co-founder of Mindset Works in the States, the world's leading learning growth mindset consultancy business. And he pointed out something really relevant to me. He said, people with growth mindset don't mind being told you're second, right? Because they think, well, okay, if I'm second, if I work a bit harder, I could become first. Whereas people with a fixed mindset are far more brittle. So they need to be told you're the best. And if they're not the best, that brittleness, they can kind of collapse. So people with a growth mindset are willing to accept that they never stop growing. And for example, Eduardo, after we recorded, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, this is the world's leader in growth mindset, asked me when we stopped recording, how did I do, Simon? And that was him being prepared to keep growing and not being brittle.
Wow. Yeah, it's really powerful when you see someone like that looking for feedback.
Yeah.
And you mentioned one of the areas that you coach is in terms of business growth. In the current environment where I know a lot of businesses are suffering, is there room for opportunities to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do a lot of pro work with ISME and SkillNet, and there's a 5-step process, right? So, it's not my process. Other coaches and consultants come up with it, but it's really important it's again around self-awareness around your business. Okay. So you need to determine where you as a business owner are coming from. What are you doing? What have you been doing? What have you invested in? So that's the first point. The second thing to do is you need to determine where are you going to. So for example, you and I have now been investing in podcasts. So we've got an eye to the future. Number 3 then is you need to pick a pathway. Okay. So a pathway could be, I need to innovate, I need to collaborate, I need to sell more to existing customers, I need to make more dollars from existing customers, I need to find new customers, I need to sell new products, new markets, I need to find new distribution channels. So that's the third bit, picking a pathway. Only after you've done all that, then do you execute, and then finally you have to keep reviewing the process. So there's no magic answer to all this stuff, but it's a bit like our personal fitness and health. If you don't work on the business, if you don't break it down into that 5-step process, if you don't think collaboratively, if you don't innovate, if you don't keep being aware of where your business is, then business doesn't just grow by itself. You have to go through that 5-step process. Hopefully that answers the question.
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's a great process, the 5 steps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whilst at the same time, from an accountant's point of view, keeping an eye on the cash levels, obviously, cash is king.
Well, maybe I should have added that the cash is king. Cash, particularly now in these times. It's funny, back right in the depth of lockdown, Justin and I gave a couple of podcasts, and we were very hard hitting, and we were telling people, this was back in the beginning of April, what you don't want to do is bury your head in the sand.
Yeah.
And the best business leaders need to be calm, they need to be compassionate, but they also need to be courageous. So if you need to bring in your credit lines, and if you need to clamp down, you have to do that. And that still applies now. I mean, and Marshall Goldsmith, I interviewed him back in April as well, the world's #1 leadership thinker.
Yeah.
And he said the same, if you're a restaurant in New York, a 5-star restaurant, you're dreaming if you think you can continue by doing home deliveries, because your business is over. It's over, okay? And you need to accept that and move on. So that calm, compassionate, but courage is critically important.
I also mentioned that you're an author of 3 5-star selling books on Amazon. I'll list them up on screen for those who aren't familiar with your work, but they're focused very much on deal making. One point you make is deal making is not just a high level M&A activity. All of us in our roles in any organization, at one point will have to close a deal, whether it's salary negotiations, appraisals, whatever. What key advice would you give to individuals or organizations in terms of deal breaking?
Oh, okay. So
deal making, I should say.
Or sometimes breaking as well.
Sorry.
So go back to the beginning. Like, as I say it in my book, How to Be a Better Deal Closer, all human beings are born with an instinct to influence. So remember, when we're kids, we used to stamp our feet and cry to get our own way. Okay. Mm-hmm. So there is something in the human psyche that wants to influence others, right? I'm not saying we're born deal makers, but there's something in us. And influencing is a key critical component of deal making, deal closing, negotiation skills. The flip side is that most of us lose that ability to influence as we go through life. School, etc., knocks it off us. So most people settle for too little. They reject optimal terms. They fail to capitalize on win-win, and so most people just forget to do this. And so it's really, again, there's no substitute from practice. But I guess the key things are that listening is so important. A lot of us listen, but we don't really hear. So the best deal closers are very good at listening. And then a subpart of that is they're very good at using silence. So the best deal, and I've had to practice on this because I'm a natural people pleaser. So when I ask you a question, I can't stand the silence. So I'll say, well, that's what I mean, So the best deal closers actually prevent themselves from filling that silence. You know what? I can see that resonates with you.
Oh, absolutely. I've never been a fan of an awkward silence, but the more I progress, the more I'm more comfortable with it.
It's important. It's very important. And the flip side is Tony Robbins talks about successful people ask better questions. Okay, so it's a bit like if you're on a diet and you go to the fridge and you open the door. That fridge doesn't know you're on a diet, right? So it's the same in life. You're only going to get the information you want back if you ask good questions. So good deal closers are good listeners. They use silence well. They ask questions. They're patient. They're also self-aware. They're hardworking. There's a guy called Ted Rubin, who's the CMO for Photify in the States. I interviewed him, and he has this term R on R, return on relationship. So for him, it's not about ROI, it's about R on R. So good deal makers build that ethical win-win relationship. And I think finally, you have to be mindful not to be deluded. A lot of people are deluded and they think they can be the best deal closer or they can be the best entrepreneur. So you need to be aware of the fine line between hard work and awareness and ability, but delusion. If you're going down the delusion route, you need to stop. So I think it's all those self-awareness traits.
Yeah, there's all sorts of quotes in terms of good leaders asking the right questions rather than feeling they have to have all the answers, which I think is important.
I think another thing just quickly add is, and I've applied this more in my life, is I've got a 3-gate test. You need to trust who you're dealing with. You need to respect, and these are and, right? You need to trust, you need to like, and you need to respect. I'm talking particularly if you're doing a collaboration type deal or a joint venture. And even if your gut says, I want to go ahead, if you don't trust yourself around trust, respect, and like, guaranteed it's going to collapse one day. I've been there. So you need to force yourself. to stop, you know.
Oh, that's good advice. I'll definitely take that on board. Thank you. I mentioned some of your career highlights, but there's a lot more accolades I could list. What's the best piece of advice you've received and it has served you well throughout your career?
I think there's two, right? I think the first one is, and it sounds a little bit of a trivial statement, but it's so important. It's what other people think of you is none of your business. It's what you think of you, right? And that's so important because the second part of this is there are three words that are used in recovery programs. And recovery, 12 steps AA and NA and all these different programs. And they're wonderful programs because they teach people a way to live honestly. Okay. So within those programs, they talk about willingness, open-mindedness, and honesty. And above all else, honesty. And I apply that to leadership. So the best leaders are willing, they're open-minded, and above all else, they're honest. Within the bounds of corporate honesty. Of course, you can't disclose everything. But so I think, going back to what I said, what other people think of you is none of your business, is what you think of you. If you know you're being as honest as you possibly can every day about everything, and that means saying no to others and being honest to yourself, nobody can ever get to you. And therefore, you're unencumbered by worry. And if you're worrying about what you said and whether you've been honest, that draws you back, that drags your psyche back. So I think willingness, open-mindedness, and honesty are critical for unencumbered leadership success.
It's been very much a recurring theme through a lot of these podcasts. A lot of my expert speakers have said, have listed vulnerability and openness and honesty as key characteristics of a good leader, effective leader.
I interviewed John Mattone, who's the world's #1 executive coach, and he talked about, and I was surprised how he talked about vulnerability being critically important, and that the best leaders demonstrate vulnerability, and that's not about being weak or surrender. It's about connecting on that human psychic level, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings struggling to survive on this planet. It's a complete mystery. There's 7 billion of us, all of whom are equal. Nobody, when we're born, our parents never give us a blueprint for how to live. Nobody gives us that blueprint. Nobody gives us a pass. When you go into an adventure park, somebody gives you a pass and it says you can ride on these 15 rides. Nobody gives you that in life, right? And bad things will happen to all of us, guaranteed, right? And so it's how you navigate through life. And so don't pretend that you're vulnerable. We're all vulnerable. We're all human beings are vulnerable. So the best leaders don't operate through the prism of ego. They operate through the prism of vulnerability.
And I always wrap up with a few quick fire questions, if that's okay. What's your favorite book?
A book that I read recently that my friend Justin Caffrey recommended to me is a book called Into the Magic Shop, written by an American neurosurgeon called James Doty, D-O-T-Y. And just very quickly, he was born from a very poor family in California. His father was an alcoholic, had terrible background, and at the age of 12 walked into a magic shop in California. It's a true book and a best-selling book. And he thought the old lady was going to teach him tricks. Over 6 weeks, she taught him the secrets of life, okay? And he's ended up becoming a neurosurgeon. And the 4 secrets to life are, number 1, relax your mind, relax your body. There's no secret to those. So people do meditation, etc. But the key thing is, before you set your goals and intents, which is the 4th step, you must focus on honest self-reflection. Everything you do must be through that prism of honesty, which is the prism of love. So relax your mind, relax your body, focus on everything you do going forward will be through honesty. And then you set your goals and magic things will happen. And I'm seeing that myself. I used to skip that 3rd step and go straight on to I'll set my goals. It always collapses. Yeah. So Into the Magic Shop's a great book.
Oh, that's great. I must pick that up. And in terms of TED Talks or motivational videos, do you have any favorites in that area?
Somebody I've recently come across, she's an inspirer in the States. Again, I interviewed her, an amazing coach consultant called Molly Chang, T-S-C-H-A-N-G. I think she's based in New York, and she's also a Marshall Goldsmith coach with me. And she's created a highly recommended, it's called the Say It Skillfully podcast series. She posts these on LinkedIn, Molly Chang, T-S-C-H-A-N-A-N-G. And she just looks at a camera and she talks about a subject, right? And it is just so visceral, so honest, so there's no frippery around it. And she just has this ability to talk about really important subjects in a really delicate but real, cutting, no nonsense way. So I think her Say It Skillfully series is fantastic. I mean, she is heading for amazing things.
Another one for me to check out. Thank you. And to finish up, do you have any favorite quotes?
There's a thing called the Serenity Prayer, which is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's the key. The wisdom to know that you and I have been through trauma, right? That there are certain things we can't control, things like cancer or plane crashing in the garden or this pandemic. We can't control them, but we can definitely control our reaction to them. So understanding the wisdom between the two, what we can and can't control, that's that gap between the stimulus and the response. That's where sanity is. We have to give that gap. The gap between the stimulus of anything and our response, that's where sanity sits. So I think the Serenity Prayer is so powerful.
As you say, being able to, accepting that you can't control the circumstances, but you can control your reaction and mindset.
It's easier said than done because we're human beings and we want to feel we control, we want to think we control things. And the other thing then is, don't get hung up on the past. As Eckhart Tolle says, the past is a figment. Basically, it's a figment of previous nows, right? It's a series of previous nows. The future is future projections of future nows. So when you think about it, there's no such thing as the past. The past never exists, and the future never exists. When you think about it. The only thing that ever exists is now. So just focus on now and what's in your control.
The other important thing is probably to allow yourself some downtime. You don't have to be positive 99% of the time. You can allow yourself 10%, 15% downtime and then pick yourself back up.
Absolutely, we're human beings. And the other thing then is, the whole premise of mindset and mindfulness.com is that a lot of people push themselves and mindset, and I must do this and I must do this. But equally, it's a bit like, those seesaws. So mindset's up here, but you've still got to balance it with mindfulness. So you still need to take time out. You have to meditate. You have to look after yourself. You have to sleep. You have to do things that if you go all the time, you think's a waste of time. I mean, the idea of sitting down for half an hour and meditating for somebody who's go seems a waste of time, but it's not. You have to nourish the soul. It's like a seesaw.
Mm-hmm. Well, Simon, you've provided me some fabulous insights and some great advice. I think the first thing I'll do tonight is sit down and watch this again for my own benefit. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. And it's been a real pleasure.
And finally, if someone wants to reach out to you and contact you, how can they go about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very active on LinkedIn all the time, every day. So on LinkedIn, my website is Simon Haigh, HAIGH.com. And my email is simon@simonhaigh.com. So, but LinkedIn's probably the easiest way. I'm kind of addicted to it, so I respond within half an hour if somebody connects. So LinkedIn probably best.
Fantastic. Thanks again. And based on all the interviewees you've referenced, I definitely have some catching up to do.
Yeah. Well, I think you should definitely connect with some of them and interview some of them. You're a great interviewer, so you should do that.
Oh, thank you. Praise indeed. Thanks, Simon. Take care.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.